is Leah Green. I work for the Resource Sharing Project, and I, as Agatha shared, work on all of our rural training and technical projects that we have going on. So I get truly, I mean, just the utter joy of getting to work with rural programs all across the country, funded through OVW and OVC to work with rural programs. And so that's what a lot of my background in advocacy has been, in working with rural communities, but also I just get the joy of talking to, programs all over the country, rural Alaska and rural Colorado and rural Florida, and they're all a little bit different because that's what is amazing about rural communities.
Right on. And so I'm Gina, Ute Mountain Ute, member here in Toyon, Colorado. I am the Rural and Indigenous Community Specialist for CICASA, and I'm so excited to partner with Leah on this amazing conversation, and just hoping that we're opening up some really important, but kind of just an insightful conversation around rural SA services, kind of, some war stories, right? Some things that, it would be nice to have a good conversation about versus having us kind of throw instructions at you, because every community is different, like Leah has mentioned. Every community is different, every makeup's different, every agency is different, capacity, all of those things. So we're going to talk about all of that, and just really looking forward to this really cool conversation. And so this first part, we're going to kind of do some grounding foundational things, kind of just have some, hey, this is what it is, type discussion. And then in our second part, we'll start talking about strategies a little bit more. My background is I ran tribal victim services for my community before I joined CICASA. So we're talking about rural, and we're talking about, obstacles and things like that. I think we've got some really great examples, and then we also want to hear from you all.
Yeah, spoiler alert, we don't have a PowerPoint. I've really been, I've been moving away from using PowerPoint presentations when doing webinars, because I feel like when I was an advocate, a lot of times I would go to these kind of webinars or training opportunities, and I really felt like there was so much wisdom in that room, and I don't ever just want to lecture to people. Like I have some, I think, pretty smart and interesting things to say, but I also really want to hear what all of you have to share, because I'm certain that there's just so much creativity and compassion when it comes to rural areas. And so I'm certain you all have brilliant things to share as well. So I wanted this to feel more conversational. I want to engage in a conversation with Gina, and for us to get to kind of talk to each other, because we both sort of have this rural expertise, but that comes from very different backgrounds. And I'm excited to chat with Gina. And I also hope that you all feel invited into the conversation as well, and don't hesitate to add in the chat box what your thoughts are, push back, give your own perspectives or your own creative ideas, so that we can kind of share this rural wisdom amongst ourselves. But I think a good place to start, like Gina said, is just like, let's just talk about the realities of rural communities and rural programs, because there are, we're talking today and in another webinar 2 weeks from now about rural sustainability. And it's something I think a lot about. The programs that I've worked for and the programs I get the opportunity to work with are often talking about, like, how do we sustain our services? And I think that's really important, because the reality of our work often doesn't allow us to think about a 5 or a 10-year plan, or to think about how to strategically set up our services, or how we strategically support advocates, because we have so much work to be done. And so I want us to get an opportunity to kind of think ahead. So today we're going to focus more on orientation and training, because I think it's really, really powerful. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be talking more about actual services and what those can look like. But let's be real. The reality of rural areas is that, like, for most rural programs that I get a chance to speak with, like I said, ruralness means something different to each rural community in each region of the country, in each state. But the generalizations we can usually make are that you have pretty big service area most of the time. There's a program in Tennessee that I work with a lot. Their service area is 14 counties. It's literally like just the left third of Tennessee. And that's not unusual for rural programs, right? That you are in charge of really vast geographic areas. And also usually on, woo, we got Tennessee in the chat box. And you're so you're supposed to be serving really big geographic areas, but usually on really small budgets and with really small staff. I am, I think, always shocked at how often I come across programs that are only like 2 or 3 employees. There's several programs I've had long-term relationships with in like Alaska and in Nevada that like have literally 2 paid staff members. And so that means like one person is responsible to be holding the 24-hour helpline at a time, which means 50% of your life is spent on the helpline. And like, that's just so much to ask of one person, right? And so like, these are maybe the most extreme versions of rural programs that I'm talking about, but what I come across a lot is just very small, very few resources, literally for the program, like small budgets, but also just rural programs have few resources. Often there's not, mental health services in your community to refer people to, or substance abuse treatment facilities near you that you can build relationships with. And so you're building often what times feels like a one-stop shop for your whole rural community. That is quite large. So that's sort of my perspective. Gina, what has your experience been, or like, where are the sticking points? Where's the hard part of being in a rural program for you?
Yeah, for sure. All of the things, all of those things. And then let's also fold in that, we have grant funding that like kind of either promotes, requires, or like says, hey, where's your culturally specific resources? So while you're also like trying to build up these resources that very likely don't exist, and you have to become them, and then you also need to somehow find you need to find and hold space for folks who hold certain identities, folks who are going to be having, larger obstacles. So, than folks who don't have those identities. And so those things oftentimes are an afterthought. Those things oftentimes come when there's enough complaints, right? Like there's enough folks who are just like, hey, where your Spanish language, resources, where's your Spanish speaker, where, like for us, we really don't have a whole lot of resources in tribal communities. So we have to partner with, with non-native communities. And then we also have to somehow create space within those resources and those agencies to like be understanding of and be competent of what culturally respectful and competent resources need to look like. So then you kind of end up being like, you're also like navigating advocacy. And then on top of that, you're doing cross education with partner agencies and building collaboration, which I feel like is like always such like a throwaway term of like, yeah, let's collaborate. And it's really not as easy as that sounds. When you're an agency struggling to provide some basic advocacy, and then like you're mentioning, Leah, there's also like some other components of it that your staff takes on, like mental health first aid training, perhaps just kind of something to have in-house and that sort of thing. But then it's like, how much of that are we like asking of individual staff, and how much do we let them know that when we onboarded them, which is kind of something we need to talk about in terms of like, when we bring staff on, when you first come in. I first came in from an accounting and auditing background for my tribe. So, and I have an undergrad in criminal justice. So I have some like basic concepts of systems, but as far as advocacy, zero. And that happens a lot, right? Because like you're saying, we have to become those resources. We have to become what's needed in this field. And so you you hit the ground truly running. You hit the treadmill that's sitting on the ground, and it's like just double speed, trying to catch up and trying to get yourself confident and comfortable with what's about to come. And these are, and these are interpersonal relationships with folks who are coming in with very serious, often, life-threatening needs. And, you know, here I am, fresh in, accountant type, right? So like trying to strategize things in that way, and you realize right away that advocacy is its own. It's not only its own field, it's also its own respect about how these things are done. It's a way of working with folks that really something like a business background is not going to prepare you for. It's absolutely everything opposite to that. So just really being honest with oneself about where we're at with things, and what your needs are. Like, what training do you need? And that's oftentimes really hard to do if you're the one in the driver's seat and now you have to like be the one to define what that looks like. And so really this is a great conversation because if I could go back, now I'm in this position where I have enough mistakes that I can like help folks walk through those things and hopefully make better choices of like, I really, really wish I would have, could have, and all of that, and then I was supervising staff who were not doing advocacy, but doing prevention things. And so that still put me back in like holding all of these hats. So advocate, program manager, supervisor, and all of those things. So you really do get a lot of roles piled onto you.
For sure. And I'm excited to see in the chat box, you are not the only accounting background Addie's got that similar experience as you. I'm really glad that you brought up this like onboarding. I mean, that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today, but I feel like that is the go-to number one. If you get a bunch of advocates in a room together, like war stories that emerge is like, what did you do on your first day? Or like, what was it like when you first started? Or like, I got trained and then the next day I did XYZ. Like it's a lot of like what you're just sort of like dumped into. And it is, it can feel humorous and something that bonds all of us together, right? That we often have this reality, but it's also something that I wish for the next generation of advocates coming in, like doesn't have to deal with, because I feel like it turns so many people off to this work and it's so complicated, but it's also all of the issues that we're talking about that make it really hard to serve people in rural communities, or these barriers that our programs have, is why we often are just like, we need to hire someone and then they need to just start working immediately, because we don't have the time to properly onboard someone or give them orientation or give them more info about how to do their job best, that like helps their own mental health and helps them like give the best services to survivors, because we just need bodies in the work right now. And so I feel like that's a lot of what I want us to talk about today, is sort of like, why is it important to train and orient people? Because I think that, I mean, I don't think I'm going to say anything radical today that nobody knows. But I think sometimes we just need that gentle reminder of how important it is, because sometimes our workload becomes so overwhelmingly, like the pile is just rising in a way that makes us feel like, well, I just have to push someone out into the field to get this done. And I want this to kind of be a conversation that like is a gentle reminder to all of us about why it's important to our organizations, to the people that are our employees and coworkers, and ultimately to the survivors in our communities, because though that's everyone that's impacted. Like our community, our programs have infrastructure that's crumbling because we haven't set up the infrastructure. We have really high rates of turnover. Our communities see the amount of turnover that we have, and other organizations don't want to collaborate with us because 6 months ago it was a different employee and 3 months before that it was a different employee. And like, how do you build long-term relationships? And ultimately survivors see through all of that. And so if we're going to bring like high quality services to survivors, then we sometimes have to sort of pump the brakes and make decisions that don't feel good in the short term, but that set us up in the long term for higher quality services.
Mhm.
And there's so much happening in the chat box. I'm going to peek at it now while I was on my
Yeah.
soapbox.
Yeah, for sure. And then I'll share very quickly around onboarding and orientation to kind of move us into that conversation of the importance of being clear about what your roles are, being clear about you know, boundaries. I feel are something that with confidence, as you grow that, you understand where to put those and what they mean to you and that they're meaningful in that way. So to ask for new folks, onboarding and orientation, like doing this spiel about boundaries, I think is kind of, it would be kind of lost on folks. But I have a really, probably a traumatizing example, but I have an example. So my first week on, so there's a lot of components to this. We can totally like unpack it. But like my first week out, I'd say maybe it was my third day on the job. I was called out to a completed suicide to go and help support our law enforcement and be there with the family. So I get there and find that it's it's folks I know, right? It's one of my sisters, it's her partner, and it's like it's all these things. And so and so I do the accompaniment to the hospital. And then I'm also like talking with law enforcement because they're like, there's things going on in here, but let her know we're not here to arrest her, because folks struggle a lot with substances in our rural communities, not just our tribal communities, but in our rural communities as well. And so unfortunately, that was also what was going on in this situation. So much of that, right? And that was just my third day on, and I'm just like, holy cow, what did I just walk into? Folks are probably thinking that accounting job was looking pretty good, huh? No. But like, again, like we become all the things, and because you're new to the role, it's hard to say no, right? Like you're trying to build those partnerships. You want to be reliable, especially like with law enforcement. When we're in rural communities, we don't have as much wiggle room, especially in this time where we're talking about, right? We're talking about police reform. We're talking about, responsible and more thoughtful policing. And a lot of times in our rural communities, and this is where I have to push back a little bit, being in a tribal community, right? Like we really don't have those resources. We really don't have a lot of standing to have like a fight in that argument about, oh, we don't need to call the police for every single thing. We kind of do a little bit, right? And so, and that just is like a little bit more of a complexity that comes along later. But in the moment, and I think that's important to think about, in the moment, what do? You're representing your program, you're representing your employees, you're representing your department, and you don't have a whole lot of backup because folks don't know what it is you do either. Right. So you want to show up and you want to be your best self, and you also want to support your partners and your collaborators. And so, obviously, if I could go back and push back a little bit more, it's not that I wouldn't have shown up. I think I would have had to necessarily because it was my family. But like I would have been a little bit more thoughtful about what this means and being clear with my partners, with law enforcement partners at the time about what things I can be called out for, and that sort of thing. So that's another important part of orientation and onboarding is, be aware of your resources, be aware of who you could have tapped in to do this if there was somebody else, and hold those boundaries. But I think for me, boundaries, it comes with confidence though. You don't know what boundaries you need until you've unfortunately gone out and, drowned a little bit. Then you're like, okay, that was a little too deep for me, that sort of thing. And then we have this extra layer now that we're practiced and we're doing TA now, right, Leah, that like, there's vicarious trauma involved in that, there's burnout just rushing towards you now, just in that one day, that one call out. And then how do you carry that into the next call? How are you carrying that into the next call and that sort of thing? So there's, for me, a lot of components in that example, like the small close-knit community-ness of rural communities. You're going to oftentimes know folks that you are you're working with, you're supporting. You're gonna be shopping with them, right? Like the next day, maybe,
Mhm.
and that sort of thing. So there's all of these things that I think for our rural providers, like you truly have to be like above and beyond on top of what it means to do advocacy and self-advocacy, and to know like what this is truly going to impact in you versus trying to be this, professional and rolling in like you have all the answers. These are all very real things that we're going to encounter with members of our community, members of people, of our families and things like that. So I think that those things are so important, and why like now I join you, Leah, in this importance around orientation and onboarding.
I love that you said boundaries come with confidence. I've never thought of it that way, but I feel like as soon as you said that, it really clicked for me. And that feels like what I believe in my heart. And I feel like that's often what I hear so much from advocates that tell me that they're like thinking about leaving or have kind of bounced between organizations, is that they don't feel confident. They're not really sure what their role is, especially so much of when we're talking about working with sexual violence survivors, because often, and I don't know what the breakdown in Colorado is, but the vast majority of the advocacy programs are dual programs serving both DV and SA. And what we hear over and over again from rural programs is that like advocates feel more comfortable working with domestic violence survivors. They have a clearer sense of what their role is. They have tangible supports they know how to help someone get. But then when it comes to working with sexual assault survivors, there's a lot more confusion and murkiness, and like just advocates don't feel comfortable and confident that they know what they're supposed to be doing or what they're supposed to be providing that person with. And then on top of that, when we're talking about rural communities, so often that rural advocate, it's a common occurrence in these big giant service areas that we're talking about, that like the main program is based in the largest city in the largest county. It might still be rural, but and then there's like advocates spread out in like one person or two people all over the county and like other counties. And what I hear a lot from is those spread out advocates that are like, I started like 3 months ago. I got to meet my coworkers like twice. I'm just here alone in an office. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know who I'm supposed to ask for help from. No one's given me like tangible resources I can read. Like, I don't know who to go to for support. And I just feel so bad because I feel like we've all been in that place. Yes, we've all been in that place where like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing and I don't know who to ask for help. And we have this culture in the United States that like our default feeling is like, if we ask for help, like we're going to show someone that we didn't know what we were doing, or, you know what I mean? Like you just start to question everything. And so I
Mhm.
feel like it's so important to the health of the advocate, like the mental health of the advocate, that they feel confident in knowing what their role is. And, we talk about advocacy and it's active listening and it's, all these things that feel like you should just know how to do them. But I feel like we talk a lot at the Resource Sharing Project about how advocacy is similar to how Julia Child would talk about how to make an omelet. It's simple, but it's not easy. Like how to actively listen, but like it's a skill that you do have to actually practice and get better at and hone, even though the active listening feels simple, right? And
Mhm.
so I feel like advocates just need a lot more time to practice and like mess up and try again in a safe space away from survivors, because what's happening now is that advocates are just practicing on survivors in the field because that's what they've been like forced to kind of do, right?
Mhm.
That's just the reality of their role when we sort of plop people in the field and are like, do your best.
Right.
And also we talk so much about like support for staff and support for survivors as like two separate things, right? When in reality, so often they are the same. And so
Mhm.
if we're gonna prioritize like getting people out in the field to serve survivors over the mental health of our advocates, like we're still prioritizing one survivor often over another kind of survivor. And if we can create good mechanisms and onboarding and training opportunities so advocates feel that confidence in their role, we are so often, whether we know it or not, helping a survivor and their mental health as well. That's my soapbox moment. That's just where my brain went in response to what you said.
Yeah, no, totally, totally. I definitely agree. And I'm um what was helpful for me is like when I started to get my footing, when I started to realize like, okay, this feels good. I'm getting it. I'm and also like every situation is different. Every situation is going to like teach you something new that you didn't know, which is a fascinating part of this. So, you know, in orientation and training, you know, for me, um, I would really hope that folks, you know, kind of sat in this place of like being okay with the fact that you're not going to know everything. We're here with this curriculum. We're here with this training module or whatever, and we're going to put you through a 40-hour or whatever it looks like for you. And at the end of it, you're probably going to see things we didn't even touch on here, and that's going to be okay, and that sort of thing. And so when I got my footing, what was helpful for me was to understand that a lot of this stuff, like it's not like the mechanics of it. It's not that, oh, I know, like, you know, this part's important or that part's important. It was really about like you're saying, Leah, like being like knowing that I had some space to do practice. I had some space to like run some things with a colleague of mine who was amazing. I don't think she's in here, but shout out to Savannah who works with BIA. Like she just totally took me under her wing and just laid it out for me, which I appreciate. But like really having amazing people to come in and just have your back and let you know, like, you know, it's okay. You know, things are going to happen. It's okay. The best we can hope for is like, you know, we of course, you know, we don't want to do more damage trying to help. But that, again, that active listening part, letting folks take the lead who know better. And we hear that in our training. They truly do know better than we do. And even though these folks are experiencing something traumatic, even though we're here doing education and we're doing intervention around, you know, understanding the control and the power and their dynamics of what they're experiencing and all of that. These folks still know better than us. And I think like that's something at orientation, folks who are new to the field really need to sit with, is like that savior complex. You are not, we are not, absolutely not. And as much and as destructive as someone coming in and practicing on someone new coming in and practicing on survivors, so is that mentality of like, I've done a 40-hour and now, you know, I know how to fix you. I know that this, you know, you're doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, and that sort of thing. And that's, to me, equally as destructive, especially when we're talking about sustainability, right? We don't know how long, I don't mean to put doom and gloom in there, but sometimes we don't know, especially for us in tribal communities, how long our program is going to last, how long we're going to exist. And so if we're going to sit in this space of like, I know what's best for you, let me save you from this situation, like you might not even be here in a month, right? You might not be here at the end of your grant cycle. So, you know, just being very careful about, you know, taking the lead. And if for no other reason, that is an important reason to think about, because you will not be there every second of every day. You know, to kind of back up again, one of the foundational things you learn about and should be learning about in training is making promises you can't keep. You also oftentimes don't have a say in how in again that sustainability of your agency. So what we're talking about, you know, there's you know, administrative things that are going on, but also like just the tasks of advocacy are also like intrinsically connected to that sustainability, right? Like your reporting numbers, you know, how folks feel, their satisfaction surveys with what you've done to support them, right? All of these things are connected to whether or not this agency or this program is going to sustain in your community. So there's a huge, like there's huge importance on each of these components to be all treated with trauma-informed responses and mindfulness. because all of it keeps it afloat. There is no real captain of the boat, honestly. Like there really is no like, flag carrier or whatever. Even in my role, I feel a lot of the success of our program really rested on the shoulders of our prevention team and the work they did doing outreach and working with our community to talk about what we do and to really hear their feedback. Because lots of times our communities have seen programs similar to ours come and go. And they're like, what's so special or different about yours? So I gave a whole lot of credit to my team who were out there and doing that work. And it allowed me to do my job and do it with some trust. I don't feel that they laid all the groundwork for that. There was a lot of it I had to also keep my end up on, but yeah, it was. So what I'm saying is we're all so connected. All of these pieces and components are connected and all equally important.
I agree. And I think the example that you gave about sort of finding this nuance between um, feeling confident in your role and that you have this when someone's talking to you, that these ideas come to mind of options that you can give this person that maybe they hadn't seen for themselves, but also respecting that this person knows the most about their life and what they want to get out of this experience of meeting with you and how they want to move forward and what healing looks like for them or what would feel healing is like such a subtle line to walk. And I feel like it's a perfect example of the things in advocacy that are like, it feels simple to say, like, give options, but respect someone's boundaries. But it's actually really nuanced. And I feel like it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to navigate. And I don't think 40 hours gets you there. I think you need so much more time to practice and quality supervision that doesn't feel punitive or scary, but that instead feels like empowering and exciting. Working at the Resource Sharing Project is the first time that I feel like I had a relationship with a supervisor where I didn't feel like when I had a meeting with her that it was like scary or she was just going to tell me everything I did wrong, that it was an opportunity for me to like grow and become excited in my work and listen to other perspectives, and that I would, and this is gonna, Leah 5 years ago would have been blown away by this, but like that I would actually be legitimately excited to attend supervision, that it would be a fun activity that I would look forward to, when so many of the organizations that I've worked with as an employee have felt like there isn't time or capacity for supervision. And so if it happens, it's because you did something wrong. And I can see also that, the realities of our programs and the realities of funding sometimes lead us to that. By no means do I think anyone I worked for or with wanted me to feel that way or, was excited to terrorize me in some way. You know what I mean? But also is just the reality that no one had ever had the time or the space to kind of question, like, how should we or how could we be doing supervision differently? And so often we also like promote people to positions of leadership in our organization because they're badass advocates, like they're amazing at advocacy, not because they have strong leadership skills or have a really strong management background. And so we also need to be providing that strong orientation and training to supervisors about what supervision looks like, because so many of us in this field and out have never had good supervision. So we don't know what that could even look like to give somebody else. Like we haven't had that modeled for us. So how do you just sort of invent for yourself what that could feel like? I think it's a very small percentage of people that can have had that experience and become a really strong supervisor. And I commend them and I'm excited that they exist, but I think they're a rarity because it's just really hard to do that when all you've ever known is sort of compensatory styles of supervision.
Yeah.
I wonder, well, we can go wherever you want to go, Gina, but I wondered if we want to start talking about what is good to cover in training and orientation. But also if you have a point, you can go for it.
Well, not a point, but I did want to say I didn't feel like I was a remarkable supervisor, but I get to bump into my former staff, and that's always something they bring up to me, which is so important to feel and to sit with, because I really didn't have the supervisor myself. And it was truly all the things you were talking about. Like I would get called in because folks didn't understand who we were or what we were doing and things like that. So I was kind of fielding other things, and didn't really get any guidance on what to do other than, what I was doing didn't make sense. And so it seemed to be wrong. But what makes me feel good this far out of that experience is that that folks who worked with me, my team, were really excited about the kind of supervision that they got from me. So is something I'm very proud of, that somehow in all of these things, that there was a good relationship between us and that they felt supported and that they were, lifted up and encouraged to build upon their skills. But yeah, let's talk about what orientation should look like. Mine consisted of tribal policies and procedures. It had nothing to do with advocacy. It had nothing to do with what was expected of me. Nothing around the things that, again, if I could go back and build that up, I definitely would have made that a part of it.
Well, let's start with training, because I feel like, and somebody jump in if you're like, I don't agree with this at all, but I feel like the reality I most of the time get is like, you're hired, you have your first day, you maybe meet some employees, and you usually as quickly as possible go into some version of training. It's usually the first thing that you kind of have. 40 hours, or I mean, it looks different in every state or territory. But I think maybe what I know about Colorado is it's like a 40-hour training. And then if you're lucky, you get some version of orientation or onboarding. I would say almost no agency I personally worked for ever had any kind of formal version of onboarding. And then you're just sort of pushed out into the world. So maybe we start with training, because I feel like often that comes first. So, and I want to hear in the chat box as well, like, what do you feel like should be prioritized in your training? What are topics you wish you'd been trained on, or you're so grateful you were trained on? And then maybe Gina and I, we could talk about some of the things that we like to prioritize. Okay, thank you. I'm going to jump in and just say anti-oppression, internal bias, and like the history of racism and oppression in the United States, I think is really deeply important. When we're talking about sexual assault survivors, we're talking about people who've experienced racism and other forms of oppression so often. Just the reality of statistics shows us that you are overwhelmingly more likely to experience sexual violence if you are a person of color, if you are part of the queer community, if you have a physical or cognitive disability. And so it should just never be an add-on. I very much understand the systemic reasons for why it's gotten to where we're at, where we see it as an add-on. But I think it's just so important to center that from the beginning, because if you can't get comfortable with your own biases and just do some like internal reflection as part of like training and like group collaboration, I just feel like you are not going to make it very far as an advocate. And you're going to feel really uncomfortable and unsure of your role so often that I think it's just like number one thing. It's just the first thing that comes to mind is like most important to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for training for me, I had to seek out my own. I got my first round of training. They were all 40-hour ones. I got them in all of the 3 states, but Colorado, that came later. So I got a 40-hour in Utah and Arizona and New Mexico. And then I also got another 40-hour that was specific to BIA and OVC that they put together a pilot program. They were all very similar. They all hit upon the same things. And there really wasn't a whole lot in there, but I think maybe because tribal victim services are so already in itself culturally specific, but doing the work that I do now in CCASA, I see the significance of anti-oppression, that should have been also included in that there are those intersections, there are those biases that do exist in our tribal communities, and they greatly impacted reporting. They greatly impacted who was vulnerable and all of the things. So definitely again, if I could go back, that would definitely have been a very foundational, like, made a point to have that be first and foremost. Um, but really, like, all of them really felt like each one before. It was all very standard. It was all the same things. But I did not see anything really specifically or as strongly geared towards anti-oppression as what I see at CCAS. And not just because I work for them, but it really is true. And kind of it was left to us to make all of these topics fit into our community, which is something that really still kind of triggers me to this day. It's like, here's this content, or here's this resource, or here's this. Now here you go, you make it fit to like what's going to work in your community. And I'm there like, I'm here for training. Like I've got people I'm working with right now, like, and now I have to like see myself and see my community and all of these things. And none of it sounds like anything I've been seeing so far, or at least I'm not connecting it, maybe because I was like treading water. Yeah, so it was, so a lot of training. So mine was the extreme, like lots of training and I got lost in it, right? So very intentional, intentional and like, just like a paced training. If I could have done that over, intentional, and have it be paced in a way that was going to be meaningful and was going to make sense to me and give me time to digest and to put into what I was seeing, I think would have made those trainings much more helpful to me. But yeah, because what I have is like, I have certificates from all of these states, right? And these in a federal agency. But what does that even mean at the end of the day? Right? Like, what did that even mean? Not that that was a waste of time or whatever, because it wasn't. These folks worked really hard to, put these trainings out. And I appreciate that they reached out to us, which was also something that's really cool. If you are in a community where you are probably going to be the only agency doing that type of work, the folks that are like willing to help you and to reach out and to support you in any kind of way, but you have to know what kind of support, right? But is really, it's amazing. But again, another piece of that is like, if I don't understand it, how can I help you help me type deal? So that's kind of what I experienced. Was there anything that folks had shared?
Yeah, I hope I was hearing this right, because I was also trying to read the chat box at the same time, trying to be present in two places. But it sounded like also kind of what you were sharing is like more interactive training, not just sort of like read this 30-page paper and now you know how to be an advocate. Like, so much about advocacy is being literally in community with other humans. And so like, those are the skills you really need to learn, is like subtle ways to portray that you're a trustworthy person, and to build trust with other people, and to respect someone else's boundaries, and like all these like really intangible things that like you can't just I mean, it's good to read, but like you can't just read about them and then suddenly know how to do them. You really need a training that feels interactive, in a place where you can practice soft skills like active listening. And I think also that sort of leads me to something that I always feel like is really important when I talk about advocacy training, which is like, what I wished I'd had was a version of advocacy training where I learned about the like foundational principles of advocacy and then how to apply them. Instead, I feel like what I got was sort of like, here's how to memorize legal processes. Here's how to be in an emergency room, sort of like settings-based advocacy. And instead, I wish I'd learned a set of skills that could be applied across any setting you come in contact with. Because when it comes to advocacy, our work is weird and it's really cool. And you cannot predict like what setting you're going to be in or who you're going to talk to that day. It's frankly what I loved so much about direct service, was like, you just didn't know what your day was going to be like. And so I think it's really helpful to have a set of skills that you feel confident and comfortable knowing how to utilize. And then when you know them, you know how to apply them in so many different settings and with different communities and in different power structures. And so I feel like that kind of sort of foundational training about like what are the principles of advocacy and like what's important to prioritize or I think are really helpful. And so in our project, we have a toolkit, we just call it the Rural Toolkit, where we put all the resources we've created along with all the resources that like I didn't create them, but I love them. And I like often find myself referring people to them, just kind of put them all in one spot for people. And so I'm gonna put our toolkit in the chat box. It's categorized into 18 different categories about advocacy. And so then you can click on each one and explore it. And so I already put one of the categories in the chat box a few chats ago that's called Advocating for All Communities. And it's sort of where we grouped all of our resources about advocating for specific racial or other oppressed groups. But another one that I think is really helpful that I'm going to put in the chat box is this resource that we created. It's called Strengthening Our Practice, 10 Essential Strengths of Sexual Violence Victim Advocates. And I think it's really helpful. Oh, thank you, Jenna. Because it just sort of, I feel like it's the resource that, so it was written before I came to my position by people that came before me, which is why I can like unequivocally, unbiased be like, it's amazing because I didn't write it, so I'm not biased. But I did update it in recent years. I helped edit it a little bit. But when I first started at my job, it was the first thing they had me read to sort of understand what my role was going to be. And I was like, wait, but these are all the answers to every question I've ever had as an advocate. I was like, where was this when I was doing my job as an advocate? And so like, I feel like it's such a good resource to give people that are new, that are trying to figure out like, what is this thing we call advocacy and how do we do it and how do we apply it? But I'm just gonna inundate you with links. There's also another section in the toolkit that's just about advocacy skills, and it's sort of all of our resources and others that we like about specific advocacy skills that you want to practice or focus on or think about when you're training. And I think a lot of what I think about advocacy fits within a lot of those resources, or what I wish I'd been trained on, or what I encourage other people to be trained on when they're a new advocate.
Yeah. I saw that Agata had dropped something in there around, most training is around the criminal justice system and how to navigate it and how to understand. And that was definitely my experience. But I think necessarily so for what we got going on in our jurisdictions and how things work in tribal communities, that you kind of have to have like some legal understanding just because of those nuances and those obstacles. Part of our community also lies in the state of Utah, and there we have around 200 members who live in that small community there, but is also considered part of our reservation and our jurisdiction, and our program had to cover that as well. So there was also another set of of laws in a criminal justice system that applied specifically to those folks and what happens there. So many complexities there. So there wasn't a whole lot of room in there to apply things like accessibility, to talk about things like, those power dynamics that you were talking about, or understanding or taking some time for the fact that, I had positional power in the work that I was doing in my own community. And though I might have, been on its face, like, oh, we're all the same. Well, now you're sitting in this position, and I didn't have a whole lot to prepare me for that, or what those implications or that was going to feel like for folks, and how like I was projecting that whether I knew it or not. And so all of those pieces that you're talking about, Leah, and the things that we include in our training at CCASA are things that I wish I would have known about. I wish I could have pushed back in that. But also and also a strength I took away is all of the stumbling, all of the mistakes, right? Because now I can name them. Now I can point them out. Now I can talk about how things need to be designed around them. So it got a little, I was able to kind of look at things that are a little bit complicated for us in that, in membership to our tribe. and that folks don't feel that they are allowed to take part in our programs. So there were survivors and victims who felt they couldn't come to us because they weren't members or recognized members of our tribe, but they lived in our communities and were being, being victimized. Probably a vulnerability all on their own in that way. And there really wasn't a whole lot that was engaging with this conversation around the fact that that wasn't true. And I didn't have a whole lot of confidence to push back on that myself. So I was literally kind of fighting my own kind of tribal system, and also trying to navigate some of these kind of like complex and kind of sophisticated um, conflicts that were coming up, that maybe we as a community haven't even addressed, but we're definitely starting to, kind of pull to the top when we were doing advocacy. And I think like that's an important part of advocacy, and is definitely a part of why I'm still working in this field now. Is we don't, a lot of the things that we as community, as society, we sweep aside, or we keep blinders on, or we just don't think are part of our concern, rise to the top when that's your work is advocacy, and you're working with survivors, and you're addressing violence and oppression, and all of these things that are rooted in that. Because right, like if oppression is a part of, it's threaded into our society, it's threaded into our community, it's threaded into how we are with each other. And only in advocacy and in this work, that stuff bubbles to the top, and we're forced to kind of to see that and to figure out a way to navigate it. And again, if you don't have that training, and that's not even a part of that conversation and all those trainings that I took, it's like, wow, this feels really wrong. Like advocacy kind of at its core, this feels really wrong, but how do I name this? How do I make the case that this is a practice we need to like pay extra attention to, or that we needed to create a response to that has to be specific to this situation? So things get really kind of nuanced in each situation. And so again, there's no training that maybe can set you up for that, but there are those foundational things that if they're not there at all, you're kind of left just sitting there like, this feels wrong, but now what? So there's the trauma, and then there's now this response to this larger conversation that we are having in our society that is involved in it, which I think is the beauty of advocacy. It's the most important power of what it means to stand with survivors, to support them, to support voices that hadn't really had a chance to be heard, and see where that helps you navigate through those conversations. And that's really how I was able to go through them, was again just resting back on the fact that that was my job, and again thinking about what our roles are. We're in advocacy, that's the definition of what we are. We're there to to question the status quo. We're there because because folks are standing in line, or and are being kind of dismissed in a way, based on things rooted in oppression, and we're there kind of pushing back on that system, or pushing back on these things. So it's necessarily work pushing back to power, and to understanding it, and kind of like redirecting it, and standing again with folks who just had nobody standing with them before, and letting them know that they are a whole person, they're a human being. So there's all of these things shooting at you, and so that training being more interactive, having those like scenarios and role playing, so important. So important.
I just, for me, I think it goes back exactly what you said at the top of like, you can't push back and it's hard to have boundaries and like do that if you don't have confidence to do it. And so often advocates are often really young, they're freshly from college, or just people that have not had enough life experience to know like how to push back, how to how to push up against power and to feel comfortable doing it which is a really hard skill. I mean, like people that are in their 50s and 60s don't know how to do that. I mean, as all a skill, we need to just always be practicing. So I'm so with you. I feel like maybe we need to switch to talking about onboarding and orientation.
Yeah.
So I really want to know from all of you, what do you wish had been covered in your orientation, or what was your orientation like? What was covered and you're like, yes, I'm so grateful I had that. Because for me, like I said, I don't think I ever really had much of an orientation of, the rest of the organization I worked for, because also, there's a lot of organizations that are more like umbrella organizations that do more than just DVSA. And so I definitely didn't always know what other parts of the organization did, or who I was supposed to go to for support, or even just like what my day was supposed to look like. I usually learned all those things over time unintentionally from my coworkers. And that meant that sometimes I was learning the wrong lessons because I was letting people that had learned the lesson from someone before them, and we don't even know why we do this thing the way that we do it, or we're doing the wrong thing, or even like I talk a lot about 24-hour helplines, because it's a complex subject. I could do a whole webinar on, but I have a lot of strong feelings about it. But one of the things that I feel like I learned really early on was like, I watched my coworkers answer the phone, and that's how I learned what I was supposed to be doing on that phone. And I learned a lot of the wrong lessons, and I learned that our helpline was mostly for people to call for shelter, and that if a sexual assault survivor called, I was just supposed to say like, well, you need to make an appointment with our one staff member who does sexual assault services. And that was so not the right lesson to have learned. But if I'd ever been given like more formal information about how we run our helpline, or how to answer specific calls certain ways, then I think that could have nipped that in the bud much sooner, right? And so what do we wish we learned in orientation? Because I feel like there's so much we could learn.
I did want to lift up really quickly what Agata had mentioned about community being a part of informing what training looks like. There were, when you are developing what training looks like, I would strongly urge folks to think of spaces in there to bring folks who represent voices in our community that we don't hear from enough, to help us do a better job. And when you really think about what that training looks like for you, it's not impossible, is what I'll say. It's not impossible to bring these folks in, and what an amazing expertise we could have access to.
Usually what I tell people is sort of like a base for onboarding orientation is like, give information about your program's philosophy or approach to victim services, because there's a lot of different styles of things. There's a lot of different methods. And if you just have staff kind of go watch some webinars about advocacy, you're going to see a lot of different perspectives and versions of advocacy in the world, and what you're supposed to be prioritizing, or how they would envision you doing this. So do you have an underlying philosophy about how you approach victim services? Do you have a foundational understanding of sort of what your program does? And if there is an approach, could you give staff more things to learn, books to read, articles that you love, and like keep that in one spot, so that when you don't have to, every time you have a new staff member, you don't have to keep go searching for these things. Like, start building that library of books you really love, or articles you come across, or webinars that you watch that are recorded, like this one that you're like, wow, it's brilliant, I need everyone to see this, and keep them in one spot so that you can give them to people over and over. I think a really basic one that no one ever really not very many organizations I think to do, is just a binder of information with information about the organization, all the people that work there, how you connect with those people, how those people prefer to be. Does someone prefer phone calls over emails? Or is Tuesday always just the worst day to talk to the financial staff? Just some of that stuff that we all know about our organizations, that could just be kind of written down and given to folks. common partnerships of like community collaboration where you're like, we are best friends with these like 3 organizations in the community, or here's some organizations we've been wanting to build partnerships with, but it seemed really hard recently. So if you get an opportunity or you run into this person somewhere, like snatch that opportunity because we've been really wanting to build a relationship with them. Just like some basic information. I mean, sit down at a staff meeting for an hour and just talk together about like, what do you all wish that you could have known? And then like write that down and put it in a binder and give it to new staff members. Something we do at the Resource Sharing Project also is whenever we hire somebody, we have them spend the first couple of weeks at their own leisure connecting with each other staff member for like a half an hour meeting. Usually it ends up turning into like a 1 hour meeting because we like talking to each other, but just to get to know that person one-on-one. What is your role? What do you do? How do you prefer to communicate? What are the areas of overlap that might exist for our respective roles in the organization? You know, things about your personal life, just so you feel connected, especially for those advocates that, like I said before, don't work out of the main office and are like just out and about in the community, and like, you know, monthly staff meeting is the only opportunity they get to like talk to their coworkers. It's really hard then to reach out and say like, I'm really struggling with this helpline call I just had and I need to talk to someone about it, or I have no idea where this paperwork is and I don't know how I'm supposed to figure it out. Like just that vulnerability that comes with being a new staff member. There's just so much that's vulnerable, and to have to ask for that kind of support, like you need to have built at least a little bit of something together. So I love that we do that at my organization.
Yeah, for sure. Just a couple of things that were shared in the chat box. Some folks wish that, you know, rape culture had been mandatory for, you know, for an organization. Um, some folks felt that, you know, they were overloaded with, you know, webinars and things like that, especially during this time of COVID, right? When we
Oh my gosh, yes.
new advocates coming on. I mean, shout out to all y'all who started in 2020. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to read.
I know, I'm reading them too. It's really,
Okay.
I'm loving how chatty you all are in the chat box. Sometimes I'm like,
Yes.
put stuff in the chat box and I get like 1, and I'm loving how chatty you all are.
Yeah, definitely. I do want to like push a little bit more into about you know, who's providing training in your organization, and just really thinking about, you know, who that is, and again checking in with that person. You know, are they burned out? Is that their only role in the organization, or are they also advocates? I had the amazing honor of working with some amazing trainers who were also doing other roles in their organization, which can be great, you know, if you have a really strong support in your supervision to, you know, pace that training for yourself. But if there's only one person, right, like, is that training happening enough? Are you checking in on that person? Because really this person is like planting seeds that are going to grow kind of along those same lines, Leah, that you had mentioned, of like, we're picking up habits. We're picking things that are being modeled for us. So are we checking in with this person who's been kind of given this responsibility to raise advocates, right? I think that's something that's so very important to do. I wanted to ask Leah, like, what is your, unless there's any questions in here. No. What are your feelings on, you know, folks who do provide training, like what does their experience look like? Should there be a requirement for like how practiced they are, or, you know, those types of things?
I think it's so hard because exactly like, I think it was Addie that maybe said, or maybe it was Jamie, I don't know. I think it was Jamie that said like, yeah, just like everyone's not destined to be a great supervisor or has the capacity to be a great supervisor that just needs more support, is similarly, I think, how it is that like just because you're amazing at being an advocate doesn't mean you're good at translating that skill to other people. And so I think that it's why I think it's really important for us to base our pay structures and like how we set up our organizations to reflect like be set up so that it's not like the trainer is maybe the highest paid staff member to your organization. Then you're not always going to get the best trainer. You're going to get the person that wants the highest salary. And
Mhm.
so instead creating or like mechanisms in your organization so that you're like prioritizing who's actually the most qualified to do this and who is excited and wants to do it. Because I think we've all been trained by somebody that like does not want to be a trainer.
Mhm.
And they're just like maybe the advocate that's been there the longest, or who is in a supervisory role, and the way that the organization has structured it is that it's like half-time supervisor, half-time trainer, and that person's really amazing at supervision but isn't strong at training. I think
Mhm.
is really important. And I think that something we did here in the state of Iowa, ooh, it's a mystery, you don't even know where I was from, I'm in Iowa. We at our coalition have something we call the Trainers Guild, where all the people that are responsible for training at the different organizations around the state of Iowa get together on like a monthly basis to talk to each other and to talk through hard conversations that came up in training that they were like, I didn't know how to address this, or to share ideas of activities to do in training or great webinars you found, or just to hone that skill of training, because it is something that you can practice and get better at, but often it's something that you either like to do or you really don't like to do. And I think that we need to give support to trainers the same way we give support to supervisors, because people are just not naturally skilled at doing that. Everything takes time and practice and resources to be good at it. And so if someone's job is I think it's also a reason why I want supervisors of trainers to really be, I mean, I think this strong supervision piece is really important to me, that like one of the things you can talk about in supervision is like, what is your workload and how does it work with the training? Because if you have such a heavy advocacy workload and you're part-time training, that like you don't have the time to be doing all of the, sometimes we think of training as just the space we are together. Like this training we're in right now is an hour and a half long, but I spent at least like 9 hours of time, like putting together an outline, having conversations with my other trainers, thinking about the way the conversation was going to go, making notes for myself, right? Like there's more that comes with training than just the time that you
Mhm.
are training someone. And do you have supervisors that understand that and are helping you balance your workload so that you have that time and space to be able to know how to provide the training that you're doing? And do you have a community of other people you can reach out to that you can say, like, I'm struggling with this component or this module I hate because I just never know how to do it. Does somebody have some insight that you can help me with? Did that answer your
Yeah.
question?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, for sure.
I have
And
feelings.
I right. And I think it's also important in supervision for supervisors to like to show up in a really supportive way for the folks who are getting out there and taking on this role of trainer. It's such a huge responsibility. Um, and for me, I think, you know, it can create some animosity, right? Because a trainer is also given kind of this expectation that they know all and that they know better, and that, you know, because you're showing other folks how to do it. And so just being really supportive with each other and giving grace to each other around, this is my role, this is the work I'm doing. If you feel that there's parts of this that I can be doing better. Again, I think that's a great idea, Leah, around getting trainers together with each other, to like help kind of work through some things. But your supervisor really needs to be on board. Your supervisor really needs to be like holding that space for you, to grow as well, to make, you know, to make your mistakes as a trainer too, or to, you know, to see that line between, you know, training versus like, this is my role as supervisor. You learned that in training, but this is how I want you to do it. So it's important for trainers and their supervisors to have a very connected and important relationship with each other, so that there's that consistency there. Because again, what training is supposed to be building is not only knowledge and foundational things, but that confidence and that comfort that needs to happen so that survivors aren't kind of feeling the brunt of those things not being done, or at least not being done well.
So I want to give time for questions, or just like, you've been lovely in the chat box, but I also want you to feel like you have a chance to like unmute yourself and share more thoughts that are hard to sometimes type out. But I think the last thing we were kind of going to say was sort of like, what are creative ways for you to navigate training and orientation? I feel like we've given a lot over the last hour and a half, but a couple that maybe slipped through the cracks were also like when you have a new, because what happens a lot is you hire like one new person, and now the training organization has to put together a 40-hour training to hire like to train one or two people. So I think something that I've seen other states do is to have sister organizations, the next closest organization to you, be in community with each other, like update each other, like, oh, I think we're going to be hiring somebody next month and we have 2 new volunteers, so we're going to be doing training 3 organizations near me. Do you have any new staff or volunteers that you need to train soon? Like, because maybe we can put them all together and lean on each other to support this training model. Or if you don't have the capacity to train people in like a really formal way, and instead of doing a bad job of training by like not knowing what you're doing, feeling really uncomfortable, not wanting to be a trainer, instead of doing that, like looking for webinars that exist in the world that you're like, I love them. These people can say this so much better than I can, or like they get at a point that I never know how to make, or whatever it is, because you don't have to be amazing at training. Like no one has to be good at that. No one's requiring you to do that. And so then putting together a list of webinars based on topics that you want to prioritize in your training. Once again, I don't know how Colorado does this, but like in the state of Iowa, we always say in our training, like you need to have 4 hours of training on anti-oppression. And I'm making up these numbers, but like 2 hours of training on support groups, or all these different topics. So then go, if you've got that in Colorado, like make a list, like these are 4 webinars that fit under this category that we want you to have. Pair people up to have conversations after the webinar, or intentionally schedule supervisions periodically while that that person is watching these webinars, so that they can still have that time to talk after the webinar has happened. So they're not just, you're not just handing them a book and say, now you know how to do advocates. Like, watch this webinar and then come to me afterwards and like, let's have a conversation about what you learned in that webinar and what you liked and what you didn't, and how to apply the specific things in that webinar to your work. And it can feel more conversational instead of more trainee, which maybe feels more comfortable. I think those were the only other ideas that I wanted to make sure we said before we ended. But do folks have questions? Do you have thoughts? Do you want to unmute yourself and share things? Do you want to brag about how amazing your organization is at rural sustainability, orientation, and training? Okay, so Alyssa, if I'm saying that right, said in the chat box, has anyone experienced or seen a mentor-mentee relationship in these trainings? It's always assumed that we fall back on one another versus having designated backup for when we have questions, concerns, challenges, etc. I keep thinking this would be a great use of the AA structure of having a sponsor to call when we're up against something. I've never thought of it as like the AA structure, but I like that framing because I think we all have a visual for that immediately. And I have come across organizations that part of their onboarding process is connecting you with someone that has been at the organization a little bit longer or has more experience in advocacy, that's your designated person. And sometimes what'll happen is that advocate, that more experienced advocate, will bring along the less experienced advocate for advocacy appointments or as they go about in the community, always, of course, getting permission from the survivor they're going to meet with, that like they're comfortable with having another person there, or sitting next to them while they answer the helpline for an afternoon. It's harder to get permission from survivors when they're calling in. So usually what we recommend is just like, you don't listen to necessarily the survivor's side of the conversation. You sit next to the advocate and listen to the way the advocate responds, the pauses they take, the tone of voice they're using, and then after each call kind of talk through abstract ideas of what the survivor was sharing and why they said certain things or didn't say certain things at parts of time in the conversation. But having that one person that you know you can go to and be like, you're the person that has my answers, I think is a great idea.
Yeah, I love it.
Jenna said, here at CCASA, we ran a the trainer program, and provided CCASA staff for mentorship for those who went through our program. It built relationships between us and members, and it helped everyone learn from each other. I love that. I love that you do that. I think it also goes without saying that everything we talked about today, training needs, orientation needs, like navigating all of this, trying to create formalized structures for these things so that in the future, I swear it will get easier. Like a lot of times there's this, it's hard at first, but then once you get over the hump, like you've got a method for yourself and you know how to go through it. But like getting over that hump can feel really hard. Like these are all things that Agata, Gina, Jenna, everybody at CCASA can help you navigate and help set up, because usually the barrier for not doing it is not just like, I'm negligent and I don't care about my employees. It's like, I have too much on my plate, too much asked of me, and I don't know where to start. And so I think everyone at me as well, but also everyone at the Colorado Coalition, I think would be a great person to go to say like, how do we start this, and have someone help you navigate it. Ainsley said, any thoughts on boundary setting and maintaining equity for small organizations that have a structure where all staff are client serving on top of their main role, i.e. the executive director, grants manager still technically sees clients, but often do not have the capacity to do so. So client services are split between 2 to 3 other advocates with their own program goals. I have lots of thoughts for you, but none that I can summarize in the next 5 minutes. So I would love to maybe have like a one-on-one conversation with you about how that's working in your organization and ways that we can restructure that. So here is actually my email address in the chat box. If you or anyone else wants to talk more specifically about a question that you have, I'm so happy to help. And then also, I think actually some of our not our PowerPoint, our conversation in 2 weeks, actually, I think we'll get to some of these things. So feel free to join for that. But also if you're like, I want an answer today, lady, you can email me and we can like talk more specifically about your program.
Yeah.
Other questions, thoughts, pushback, you're like, this is never gonna work. I will give you a pep talk, I promise. I feel like 50% of my job is giving people pep talks. So in 2 weeks, we're doing part 2 of this. It's called Rural Sustainability Prioritizing Services. And we're gonna talk about so much stuff. I know Gina's really excited for this one. And I just think that we're going to talk about the reality that like it's physically, humanly impossible for us to serve 100% of the survivors that exist in our rural communities. And so inevitably we have to make trade-offs. We have to make decisions about what services we're prioritizing and who we're prioritizing serving, right? Because there is just too many survivors that exist in this country, and the amount of money we get does not equal the number of people that need to be served. So we're going to have really honest conversations about what it means in a rural community to make these decisions about how and who we're serving. So I hope you get to join in 2 weeks and listen to us ramble at each other for another hour and a half.
Thank you so much, Leah and Gina. Thank you, everybody, for being here. If you have any questions that you want to direct to the presenters, please send us an email and we will connect you with them. Please, like Leah said, we would really encourage you to be back with us. The next webinar is going to be April 22nd at 2 o'clock. Same channel. You have to register. Please do so. And then just a reminder to please fill out our survey that we'll be sending you pretty soon, as well as we will be sending you with that email. We will be sending you the links that Leah was putting in the chat box, so all of you will have that information. Thank you again. Have a fantastic afternoon. Thank you, presenters. You are lovely and awesome. And have a fantastic day, everybody. We'll see you soon.
I actually just thought of one more resource, and if people go, it's okay. I'm going to put in the chat box. It's a resource we wrote specifically for rural programs about how to do supervision with people that aren't necessarily in the office that you're working out of. So how do you supervise those people that are sprinkled all over your service area that you don't get to see on a day-to-day basis? So putting that in the chat box. If people already ran away because we dismissed them, that's okay. They'll at least get this in the email.
I got it. And I also was thinking if you have any resources that talk about supervising people from different backgrounds, like, culturally specific backgrounds, when you are, when there's those differences, that would be fantastic if you have it, I could add it to the list as well.
I don't have any, but I feel like you and I should create that resource. I would love to write that with you.
How about if we do that and we ask our amazing Elizabeth to join us?
That would be perfect.
Thank you. Sure. I'm always up for the challenge.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care. Stay safe.
Great work, Gina and Leah, but she's gone.
Thanks, Jenna. Thank you guys for